We're back and we're thrilled to be joined by this week's Beast of the Week, Ben Meiselas. Ben is the co-founder of MeidasTouch, one of the most influential pro-democracy media networks that has amassed millions of followers and helped shape progressive messaging with fact-driven, rapid response content. Beyond media, Ben is a powerhouse attorney in an impressive side quest. He represented Colin Kaepernick in his historic case against the NFL and later became his business partner. Not a bad idea. He teaches sports law at USC and he's led major class action lawsuits against corporate giants. If you want the news cut, dried and seasoned and not sprinkled with flowers, Ben Meiselas is your guy. Ben, thanks for joining us and congratulations on elbowing Joe Rogan out of the top spot of the most listened to podcasts.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to talk to you.
Very excited.
I think we have to go right into it. We all watched the congressional address. First impressions, last impressions, all impressions in between. Did you love it?
I definitely didn't love it.
No.
It was embarrassing. It was shameful. He just made up things. He wanted to be applauded for things that he didn't do, and then was saying, why aren't you clapping for me? I mean, the whole thing was just, it was just strange, not normal. And then to see sitting there, one of the major political parties, the Republican Party, like clapping for this stuff as he's talking about taking over Greenland and we're going to conquer it one way or another, and talking about taking over Panama and saying how the tariffs are gonna hurt people, but you know what? It's gonna be okay for a little bit, right, everybody? I'm just listening to this and I'm like, this is not normal. This is not normal crap.
Yeah, and mocking other countries and everybody just going along with it and laughing and clapping at like cutting off aid to nations who desperately need it. I actually found it really pretty like very in character, very expected. Do you normally watch these spectacles? Like, how do you normally watch this type of congressional address? I never really love them.
You know, I unfortunately, for what I do, have to watch them all. And so I've probably have watched every single or close to every single Trump speech, and I going back, to, I mean, at least in recent memory, the Waco, Texas speech where he kicked off his campaign. And the very first thing that they did when he kicked off his campaign was they replaced the American anthem with the January 6th anthem. And they said, please rise for the January 6th insurrectionists, the unfairly treated hostages. And then they proceeded, instead of the national anthem, to play a song that was creepy and eerie, and it was recorded in the prison by some of the worst January 6th insurrectionists on the 30th anniversary of the Waco siege, on the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. And then the speech, I think Ted Nugent was then one of the first speakers.
Fantastic.
Ted Nugent called Zelensky like a raging homosexual. And then everybody started clapping for that. And I'm watching this, and I'm saying to myself, this is a heinous and despicable spectacle. And then I was looking at the news coverage for it, and the news coverage treated this thing as though it was, Al Gore, George W. Bush, as though it was, Bob Dole, Bill Clinton. And I'm like, did you just hear what the hell I just heard? And then it was important that I saw it in its full context, because then I would report about it. And that was ultimately some of the connections that I started building this network in earnest then, though. And it goes right to your question, because I'd watch this, it would shock my conscience. And then I would just say it in plain terms, what I saw. And there was just not a lot of other people who were saying it, but the people felt it, people sensed it. So then there was this connection with the audience where I was like looking at the camera, and again, I don't really have a journalist background. I'm not like a political person. And I just looked at the camera and I would just say, like, did we just watch that? Like, do y'all see that? And that's kind of, part of the origin story of our growth. But to answer your question, yes, I watched them all. And I can tell you, he says this here, he says this there. I can tell you where he's going with his policies based on like studying these speeches.
You have a myopic understanding and history of Donald Trump's performances, which I find fascinating, which you drop into your podcast. I want to come back to how you built your network in a moment. But just to finish on last night, you see, I had a different reaction. I thought it was he took something which is traditionally boring and turned it into a political version of The Price is Right. We had DJ who just got cancer treatment. We had all these people up there who had incredible personal stories, which you can't take away from them. He's obviously politicizing them. But I actually thought it was masterful. I thought it was too long. I think he's going into his Castro phase. I'm nervous that next year it'll be 7 hours, which was Castro's average speech. But I thought it was masterful television. And I think, Ben, to your point about Waco earlier, the thing that Donald Trump understands is his audience, and you understand your audience, and you've built your audience.
He does understand his audience, but I have to say that I found it very consistent with everything he's ever said, so there were no big surprises to me, and I actually found it very stale and boring and provocative, but I didn't feel like I was taking the bait because I've heard all this stuff so many times before. I mean, it shocks your conscience, and the way that you speak about it so plainly and so directly is like it's the secret sauce, and it is actually missing from the discourse. And I do think that that is why people are really drawn to you. It's why I'm drawn to you.
I think that you have either it being approached at an elitist level that's talking down to audiences, not to audiences, or you have people who are yelling in their presentation and fighting.
Right.
And my approach is a bit kind of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I sit here in my living room, I experience it with the audience, and then I just share with the audience what my experience is. And Joanna, to your point though, I like boring in politics.
Yes.
I like excitement in TV. I don't like waking up knowing is the Dow Jones going to crash, even if it's masterful TV for Donald Trump to threaten allies and NATO and bring an ally that's a war hero into the Oval Office. One can argue, Joanna, what masterful television, and you couldn't script it better in a action movie, or a horror movie, whichever movie you want to do. What happened last week, for example, with Zelensky. But like ultimately, the broader project that I have is I want to desensationalize and deconstruct where I think politics has gone, because I want to go back to watching entertainment as entertainment.
Right.
And I want my politics to be serious business where it's life or death for people. And where I try to bring my audience back into it is to say, yeah, sure. I mean, I get it. Like that may be something funny if we were watching the movie Idiocracy meets Billy Madison. But this is your Medicaid and this is your Social Security.
Yes. I mean, it's just provocation after provocation after provocation. And then the context behind all of it is that the stock market is in total turmoil. Tariffs, everybody is... I'm from Canada originally, and people are reeling from this already. It's total chaos. It feels ridiculous to have to watch half of our government stand up and cheer for the most heinous things you've ever heard. It's ridiculous.
Well, the House, the entire Republican Party looked utterly whipped under him, didn't they? So Ben, I take your origin story from listening to Donald Trump and Waco. How have you created such an extraordinary network that you've managed to knock Joe Rogan off the top of the podcast charts? Congratulations on that. You started showing up in my feed. Ron Filipowski, your editor-in-chief of MeidasTouch, is fantastic. I think he's an incredible correspondent for you. And you've got your brothers, Geordie and Brett. Tell us about the Meiselas family. I mean, what was your mum putting in your breakfast? What are Sam and I doing wrong here? Come on, why haven't we bred podcast winners?
Because we never we never viewed what we were doing as how can we beat Joe Rogan, and we
Right.
actually never viewed what we were doing as, hey, we wanted to create this massive podcast. I mean, it was really organic and being built brick by brick of, we just wanted to speak out about how we felt about these crazy times. And then it connected with an audience and a community of people who call themselves the Meidas Mighty. And it's a group of literally millions of people now. But at the time, it started with 5 people who would watch, and then 10 people, and then 50 people. And it's just people who want normalcy return to politics. And they've been the backbone of this movement. But when we set out, we all had different talents. Brett is a digital editor. He worked at a lot of TV shows growing up and would do their digital stuff when he was, in his 20s. I was a civil rights lawyer. I represented families in Bakersfield, whether they were Democratic or Republican. Bakersfield is a red dot in a blue state in California. And I would represent a lot of families there in cases against the government and the police. I'd help lead rallies there. And so my background was in civil rights law, which connected me to Colin Kaepernick, and I was his lawyer. And then I pivoted to...
You were his lawyer with the against the NFL, correct?
Correct. And then I did his deal with Nike, and I helped build his media businesses with him, which gave me a background in how to build something if you wanted to. And then my younger brother, Jordy, is a marketing executive. And so we put those talents together in terms of being able to build this. And it just kind of grew organically. I don't even view what I do in terms of fitting a neat political category, although people put me into buckets right away. But I never viewed what I'm trying to do as like, I think the Rogans of the world, I think what they did is very problematic because I think they weaponize their comedy. I think they weaponize, which I don't even find that funny, to be honest. They weaponize their comedy, their sports, entertainment, and they pretended it was about that. But that was really subterfuge for a political agenda to, in my view, launder the oligarchy at the very last minute. And so they hid their political leanings. I pretty much make it clear where I stand on issues in a very fact-based way. But my goal is actually deconstructing the chaos and the craziness to try to give people the facts so that they can go out and really know how they're being played, how they're being taken advantage of, and what the tactics are. I think that's what hits.
You also have the ability to just speak in one long continuous sentence for hours. It's very impressive. Like you and Joe Rogan both talk. Like Sam and I have conversations with each other, but the thing I can't do, and I would love to be able to do, is the thing you can do, which is just talk. It's fascinating to me, and that's what Rogan does. It's this new style of communicating, I guess. But I wanted to make sure that we talked to you also about Alyssa Slotnick's response. Did you manage to see it?
It was great. I thought it was a great response, and I didn't know what to expect. I knew her as a member of Congress. I followed her Senate campaign in Michigan a little bit, saw her speak at a few Kamala events, but I wasn't sure what to expect. But I thought she did a good job bringing it back to what the issues are, which is, if you're probably sitting there, and I think Joanna, she raised your point exactly, which is you might have found that a little bit entertaining, but right now you're struggling, and the markets were crashing, when she was, that day, and the prices are not going down. And remember what he promised. So I thought she hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I thought she did too. I thought she did a great job of communicating that, like, the show is the show, but you're the government now, boys. Time to actually do things. Can I ask how your operation actually, can I just ask how you do the work? What does that actually look like so are you taking notes? Do you have a team? How big is your team? Do you mind me asking just kind of the technical?
In terms of my notes, I think these were all the notes I took yesterday. I'm holding it up. It's just one page of a notebook, which is probably my entire day of notes, maybe 2 days. So I don't do it with notes at all. I'm following the news from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, which is a lot of the day. We've got a number of producers who, a lot of them started off as interns in college, and then they became, the producers, and they've kind of grown with the company. They help editing the videos and putting the podcasts on the on the network. I'm the main contributor of the MeidasTouch channel, but we have a number of other great contributors who are on the main MeidasTouch YouTube channel, like Francis Maxwell. We've got some great lawyers like Karen Friedman Agnifilo, who some people may know. She's the defense lawyer that everyone sees on, she was the number 2 at the Manhattan DA's office, but she's Luigi Mangione's lawyer now. So,
Okay.
What has she talked to you about? What his defense is going to be, Ben?
yeah, we don't really talk about that. And she has, her own attorney-client privilege to protect there. I'm proud of her whenever I see her at those appearances. But she was the number 2 at the Manhattan DA's office. I mean, she's one of the top lawyers out there in the country. We have people like David Arenberg and Harry Littman, people who you've seen on cable, who are very well-respected lawyers, Michael Popak and others. And so they're the hosts. And then we have the main MeidasTouch YouTube channel. We have a number of other YouTube channels, like our Gen Z channel from Adam Mockler. And Adam Mockler was in the Capitol building during the State of the Union, or the joint session, interviewing all the members of Congress. He had his Wi-Fi backpack. We have a number of channels like that. So host, correspondents, broadcasting throughout the day. And then we have an editorial team that's led by Ron Filipkowski, with researchers and people who do the clips, who I'm sure people know from social media, ACYN, ACYN.
He's
and
amazing.
He clips all of the main, the things that ultimately drive the political cycles. And usually cable news and other news networks take ACYN's clips. He's so good at it.
Right.
And so that's helpful for my process also when I do video.
He's got a very, very good eye. What do you think legacy media has done wrong that all these independent media companies such as Meidas have formed in the ashes of their fire?
I just think that they forgot that they have viewers, and viewers they took for granted that their viewers would always be there, and they thought they could sell their viewers on kind of anything, and because they controlled the pipes, their viewers had nowhere else to go. And I think that they neglected that their viewers are smart, their viewers are pissed, their viewers are people, and they need to build that trust. You think about the origins of the Fourth Estate, where this connection that was made between the reporter who would speak to the audience, who was one of the most trusted people in their, in their homes. And I think that trust had been eroded over time, and they lost the trust of their audience, and they lost their trust of the audience by sometimes both sidesing issues that shouldn't really have a both sides to them, and just saying, hey, on the one hand, this was said, on the other hand, this is said. And then people were like, what are you talking about? Like, you're talking about, to the example I gave earlier, you're acting like this speech in Waco, Texas is a normal event,
Right.
and it's not. Don't treat it normal. And just stuff like that would start to wear on people. And so you would have the right-wing people, they had a home. They would go to Fox. Fox would tell them what they wanted to hear. And then you'd go to kind of corporate legacy media, and they would kind of give you a both sides.
Sure. Well, they also had a real, and I think legitimate worry about losing access to those rooms. Whereas if you kind of come in and you have no access anyway, you can build an authentic brand, because you're never going to be, for the most part, you weren't allowed into the rooms anyway. So it didn't really matter. You can be independent, and it's very valuable.
Right. And then it turned out that everybody overestimated access, at least during the White House under Joe Biden, because the White House correspondents were so bad at flagging what was actually going on.
Do you have a sense of your demographics? Who is listening? Who is watching? Who is listening?
And what's your revenue base, Ben?
So I would say the audience is different in different platforms, which shouldn't be shocking, right? My TikTok audience is younger, Gen Z, and between the TikTok audience we have from the MeidasTouch network, and I'm sure you've seen Aaron Parnas on TikTok as well. Aaron's affiliated with the MeidasTouch network too. So young audience there. I would say our podcast audience is a mixture of younger and older. Our YouTube audience are the exact people who are cutting the cable from cable news. Like when you ask people now where they get their news from, they'll put MeidasTouch in the category of, I used to watch, I'm not specifically singling them out, but I used to watch CNN. I now watch MTN. And they'll view it in that perspective. We deconstruct the 24-hour cycle into meaningful 12 to 15-minute pieces about the issues that matter most to our audience. They consume that as they used to consume cable.
Can I ask a question? I mean, what is your level of risk tolerance? Because I feel like we've got Kash Patel as the, head of our federal law enforcement, and Pam Bondi, our attorney general. I guess, do you fear retaliation, or how do you process that? Do you consider that as you're doing your work?
Yeah, but not to be morbid. My perspective on this stuff is literally that it shocks me that people are so scared of things. I understand why people would be fearful of things, and I don't mean to minimize it, but like my whole view on everything is that like you only, as far as I know, I'm only gonna live once, and I just don't understand why I would want to constantly live a life of being like humiliated on a daily basis, like some of these,
Like Marco Rubio?
Poor Marco Rubio. Mini Marco, he's the first to go, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, just to see him singled out at the State of the Union like that and kind of mocked by Trump, and he looks like a defeated man. Like you see him, not just the slouching with Zelensky, but you look at his face, and look, this was a guy. His parents were Cuban refugees. He was the rising star in the Republican Party. He had this incredible future ahead of him. He was someone who stood up to Russia because of the parents' experience with the Cubans. And now he's there supporting an administration. I mean, I'd rather, not to say I'd rather be dead, but maybe, I don't know. I don't know how you go. I don't know how you go about living a life like that. So when I hear about the retaliation and all of these things, I mean, sure, all of that is a possibility. But before I started doing this, I lived, when you're doing civil rights work on the front lines in Bakersfield, where you have people like Sheriff Youngblood, and the cases that I was handling involved Bakersfield police officers who were dealing drugs into the community with confidential informants off the books, and we were finding out which officers were selling the drugs off the books, who were then federally prosecuted, and then they were back into the public. And like, I just think to myself of every day, go through the reps, chop wood every day, knock out the videos, do the work, keep on building. And then I just think long-term generationally of what am I trying to build here? And what I'm trying to build is something one day that is in that I think it already is, in a quick time, but like to build something that has this generational pull, this thing that people go, oh, there was Fox and now there's MeidasTouch, where where it's the opposite of Fox. Like I want to deconstruct that, where like I talk about, where everyone's like, oh, we need like, super masculine, whatever. My response to that is, look, first off, super masculine people don't say super masculine. So let's start with that premise that's just not, that's weird. Second, people who consider themselves alpha or whatever the hell, like, you don't bully people. You don't punch down. I never knew growing up in high school. I played sports in high school. It was never, to me, the quote unquote cool thing to do would be to find the weakest kid and to mock them. Like, to me, that's messed up. It was always the opposite. It was always you lent a hand, you stood up against the bully.
Protect.
That, to me,
You're the protector.
you were the yes. And so, to me, this whole conversation about all of that is so wrong, is so incorrect. And I want to shift that framework and just say, hey, that we can talk about empathy, we can care about people. We don't have to sacrifice those values in pursuit of wins. Most Americans will stand with you. And to your point about, what's getting lost, people are just so caught in these weird right-wing frameworks sometimes about all of these culture war issues, that they're forgetting about their own lives and standing up for their own lives and just talking about things that are really impacting people, their jobs, their social security, their healthcare, their education. Like, what are they going to be doing tomorrow? So that's my focus.
Well, you are on a growth trajectory, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to talk to us, because I think you're just doing great work. And
yeah, I'm so, you know,
we're in
awe. We're in shock and awe. And we know you've got to go off and teach sports rights, sports legal rights now, right? I literally don't understand how you have the time. Sam and I stagger to make one podcast a week.
I teach an undergrad class at USC Law in the spring, and then a law class in the fall. And I teach it on sports law based on my background when I would represent a lot of athletes in these cases, but also sports, as we know, is also one of the kind of touch points that has been used quite frequently as ways to, I think, push people to believe that it's a conversation about sports. But then there is this, big reveal at the end that it actually is pushing people into, I think some of these right-wing echo chambers. And so I think it is an area worth, when I represented Colin, he was one of the first people that Trump said, private individuals who Trump targeted, get that SOB off the field. And he was setting an example using sports with an incredible black quarterback to say, I'm going to take your job, and then I'm going to show others that I can do it. So there is an intersection there as well. And I think that led to all of this.
Well, you've pulled off something extraordinary, Ben. Thank you very much for joining us. And I hope you'll come back and join us again.
Just let me know when.
Thank you so much.